Most people think national parks are some of the safest places on Earth. Clearly marked trails. Rules. Rangers on patrol. Millions of visitors walk through these forests every year believing that if something were wrong, if something didn't belong, someone would notice. But park rangers don't just enforce rules or rescue lost hikers. They spend more time alone in the wilderness than almost anyone else. They see what happens after the crowds leave. They hear what moves when everything else goes quiet. And sometimes, they encounter things that never make it into official reports. Tonight's stories come from park rangers, men and women trained to recognize animal behavior, human threats, and environmental danger. Which is exactly why, when they say something wasn't human, it's worth listening. I'd been a park ranger for nearly 6 years when this happened. By that point, I was comfortable being alone in the forest. Comfortable enough to tell when something was wrong, not logically, but instinctively. The kind of feeling you only get after spending thousands of hours in the same environment. This took place in a restricted section of the park. No marked trails. No campsites. No visitors allowed after dark. I was responding to a motion sensor alert just after midnight. The sensor was mounted near an old fire road that hadn't been used since the 1980s. Most of the time, those alerts were caused by deer, elk, or falling branches. Still, protocol required a visual check. I parked my truck at the access gate and continued on foot with a flashlight and radio. The forest was unusually quiet. No insects. No wind. Even the trees felt still, like they were listening. About 20 minutes in, I heard footsteps behind me. At first, I wasn't alarmed. Footsteps in the woods happen. Animals move. Branches snap. But these were different. They were steady, rhythmic, and perfectly matched to my pace. I stopped walking. The footsteps stopped instantly. I turned around, expecting to see another ranger or maybe a lost hiker who'd ignored the closures. There was nothing there. No movement. No sound. Just trees and darkness. I shrugged it off and kept moving. Within seconds, the footsteps returned. Same distance. Same pace. I stopped again. They stopped. Turned around. Nothing. This happened 4 times. On the 5th stop, I didn't turn around. I stood perfectly still, listening. The footsteps kept coming. Closer now. Slow. Deliberate. That's when I realized something that made my stomach tighten. There was no sound of boots. No crunch of gravel. No rustling fabric. Whatever was walking behind me was barefoot. The footsteps stopped less than a foot behind me. I could feel it there. Not touching me. Not breathing. Just occupying space. I keyed my radio with shaking hands and requested immediate backup. I didn't explain why. I didn't have words for it. The moment my radio crackled to life, the pressure behind me vanished. No retreating footsteps. No movement. Just silence. When backup arrived, they found no tracks except my own. I still patrol that park. But I never walked that road alone anymore. I was working dispatch that night, which already put me in a bad mood. Most rangers prefer being out in the field, not sitting in a dim room staring at monitors and radios. Dispatch nights are usually quiet, routine check-ins, weather updates, the occasional drunk camper who wandered too far from their site. At exactly 2:17 a.m., one of the lines lit up. That alone was unusual. This was a direct call, not a transferred emergency. The caller ID showed no number. No tower bounce. No static. I answered. At first, I thought the line was open but silent. Then I heard breathing. Slow. Controlled. Like someone trying very hard not to make noise. I asked the standard questions. Name. Location. Nature of the emergency. The response came as a whisper. I can hear you walking. I froze. I wasn't walking. I was sitting at the desk, hands flat on the surface in front of me. I asked the caller to repeat themselves. I can hear you walking, they said again. Same whisper. Same calm tone. I asked for their location. They gave coordinates. My blood ran cold when I saw where they pointed. The coordinates were deep inside a protected zone of the park. No trails. No campsites. No access roads. And most importantly, no cell service. Radios barely worked there on a good day. I told the caller to stay where they were and asked if they were injured. There was a long pause. Then they said something that still bothers me. You stopped. I checked the security cameras in the dispatch room without moving my feet. Nothing had changed. The line went dead. No click. No static. Just silence. Search teams were sent at first light. They found no phone. No campsite. No human tracks. But around the exact point where the coordinates led, they found something else. Footprints. Bare. Uneven. Too long to be human. And circling the area, as if whatever made them had been walking around, listening. This story comes from a senior ranger, someone I trusted completely. He had over 20 years in the service and had dealt with everything from bear attacks to armed poachers. He wasn't the kind of person who exaggerated or speak you. He was assigned to a popular hiking corridor after multiple reports came in about aggressive deer behavior. Not charging. No attacking. Just standing too close. Watching. Visitors said the deer didn't flinch when shouted at. Didn't retreat when approached. Just stood there, staring, even when people backed away. The ranger went out just before sunset to investigate. He spotted the deer near a clearing off the trail. At first glance, everything looked normal. Until he realized the deer wasn't moving at all. No grazing. No twitching ears. No shifting weight. Just standing there. He raised his flashlight. That's when the deer straightened. Not fully upright, but enough that its front legs barely touched the ground. The movement was wrong. Too smooth. Too controlled. The deer's head turned slowly toward him. Its eyes reflected the light, but not the way animal eyes usually do. There was no wide glow. No scatter. Just a focused, narrow reflection, like it was looking back at him deliberately. He took a step back. The deer didn't react. Then, without dropping back down, it stepped backward into the trees. It never broke eye contact. The ranger reported unusual wildlife behavior, nothing more. Later that night, other rangers found tracks near the clearing. They started as hooves. And ended as something else. Winter patrols are supposed to be easier in some ways. Snow preserves tracks. Sound carries farther. And animals behave more predictably. That's what we're taught. That's what makes this incident so difficult to explain. I was assigned to inspect a damaged boundary fence near the eastern edge of the park. The fence had been repaired twice in the same month and torn apart again within days. At first, it was blamed on elk or fallen trees, but the damage didn't match either. Entire sections were bent inward, as if something had leaned against them repeatedly. I arrived just before dusk. Fresh snow covered the ground, unbroken except for a long, shallow drag mark running parallel to the tree line. It looked as if something had been pulled slowly across the snow, not randomly, but with intention. I followed it on foot, keeping the trees on my right and the open field on my left. The wind was strong that evening, blowing steadily from east to west, hard enough to sway the taller pines. As I walked, I noticed a shadow moving along the edge of the forest. At first, I assumed it was just branches shifting with the wind, but the more I watched it, the more wrong it felt. The shadow was moving west to east. Against the wind. Smoothly. Independently. I stopped walking. The shadow stopped at the exact same moment. I waited. The wind continued to push the trees, but the shadow remained still. I raised my flashlight and aimed it directly at the spot where I'd seen it. There was nothing there. No animal. No tree trunk shaped strangely. Just empty space between the trees. When I lowered the flashlight, the shadow was closer. Not by much. But close enough that I could tell it wasn't attached to anything physical. I radioed in, reporting unusual conditions and requesting another ranger to join me. Static answered back. No signal. I tried again. Nothing. The shadow moved again, slowly, carefully, like it was aware of my attention. I didn't run. I backed away step by step, never turning my back to the tree line. The shadow matched my movement perfectly. When I reached my truck and shut the door, the shadow stopped at the edge of the headlights and didn't cross into the light. The fence was removed entirely the following week. No explanation was given. Emergency calls are rarely clear. People panic. Signals distort. Voices overlap with background noise. That's why this one stood out immediately. The call came in just after midnight. No words. Just screaming. A single voice, high with fear, echoing faintly as if coming from a wide, open space. Then it stopped. Abruptly. No fade. No interference. Like someone had pressed a button. We traced the signal to a ravine known for its acoustics. Sounds there bounce, repeat, stretch unnaturally. It's the kind of place where a single shout can echo for minutes. When we arrived, the ravine was silent. Snow covered the ground evenly. No footprints leading down. No signs of a fall. We spread out anyway, searching the rim and the lower paths. After nearly an hour, one of the rangers froze and raised his hand for silence. Then we heard it. A scream. The same scream. Same pitch. Same length. But this time, there was no echo. No reverberation. It cut off instantly, mid-sound, like a recording being stopped. Everyone heard it. Every radio captured it. We searched until sunrise. We never found a person. No missing hiker matched the voice. That recording still exists, but it's never been released. This happened during a late-season wildlife survey when several rangers were assigned to monitor animal movement overnight. Nothing unusual at first. Then the radios started lighting up with the same report. Elk pacing instead of resting. Deer clustered tightly together, facing outward, refusing to graze. Predators completely absent. No coyotes. No wolves. Nothing. One ranger reported hearing branches snapping repeatedly in the same pattern, like footsteps circling the perimeter of the observation area. Another reported something mimicking owl calls but getting the timing wrong. Animals react to predators instinctively. They flee. They scatter. This was different. Everything stayed in place. Watching. Waiting. At approximately 3 a.m., every animal in the area went silent at the same time. No movement. No sound. That silence lasted nearly 6 minutes. When it ended, the animals fled in all directions without warning. None of the rangers could explain what caused it. The report was filed as environmental disturbance. Rangers depend on routine more than most people realize. The wilderness is unpredictable, so consistency keeps you alive. Patrol routes are logged. Check-ins happen at the same time every night. If someone misses one, it's noticed immediately. That's why this started as a concern, not fear. One ranger began noticing his radio would crackle seconds before his scheduled check-in. Not during. Before. At first, he assumed it was interference or a delayed signal from dispatch. It happened again the next night. And the next. Always 30 to 40 seconds before he was due to call in. He mentioned it casually at first. Nobody took it seriously. Radios do strange things in the forest. Then the crackling changed. It wasn't random anymore. It came in short bursts, evenly spaced, like someone tapping a microphone to test a channel. He tried changing frequencies. It followed. He powered the radio off once just to be sure. The crackling still came through faintly, distorted but present, like something pushing through static. One night, just before his check-in, a voice came through. Calm. Low. Familiar. It said his name. Not shouted. Not distorted. Spoken the way a coworker would speak when they already knew you were there. Then it told him he was late. He looked at his watch. He wasn't. He didn't respond immediately. He waited for dispatch to speak. Nothing. When he finally answered, asking dispatch to confirm the transmission, they told him they hadn't sent anything. They hadn't heard anything. The voice never came back that night. Or the next. But the ranger started changing his patrol route. His check-in times. Even his radio habits. No matter what he changed, something always happened just before he was supposed to speak. A crackle. A whisper. A breath too close to the microphone. He said it felt like something had learned how the system worked faster than he could disrupt it. He resigned without finishing the season. When asked why, he said routines aren't safe once. Something else starts anticipating them. There is one incident that isn't openly discussed, even among rangers who have seen everything else. It happened late in the season, after visitor hours, when only staff remained in the park. At first, it was just radio problems. Intermittent static. Missed check-ins. Then GPS trackers began showing erratic movement. Units appearing briefly in areas they weren't assigned to, then vanishing from the system entirely. Dispatch issued an evacuation order without explanation. All rangers were told to abandon patrols immediately and regroup at the main access road. No questions. No delays. Radios failed in waves as units tried to confirm. Some rangers reported hearing voices over open channels that didn't belong to anyone currently on duty. Others heard nothing at all. Everyone eventually reached the road. Everyone except one ranger. He emerged from the tree line just before sunrise. Walking calmly. Not injured. Not panicked. His uniform was clean, but his boots were heavy with mud from an area miles away from his patrol zone. When asked where he had been, he said he'd followed someone who sounded like another ranger calling for help. He said the voice knew his name. Knew where he was supposed to be. Knew how to sound urgent without sounding panicked. When asked what he found, he stopped answering questions. His resignation was submitted the following week. His final written report was one sentence long. It knew my name before I told it. Most people believe the wilderness is dangerous because it's empty. Too vast. Too quiet. Park rangers know that isn't true. The forest is never empty. It remembers voices. It observes patterns. It notices routines. And whatever exists in the deepest parts of these places doesn't rush. It waits. It listens. It learns. You don't have to see it for it to understand you. You don't have to believe in it for it to follow you. And if you spend enough nights alone out there, eventually you realize something has been walking your patrol long before you ever noticed it. The last call came in just before dawn, during that uneasy hour when night hasn't fully loosened its grip and morning refuses to arrive. Fog rolled down from the ridge in slow, deliberate waves, clinging to the trees like something alive. We had been getting reports all week: missing hikers, radios going silent mid-transmission, a pickup truck found abandoned on an old logging road with the door open and the keys still in the ignition. No footprints leading away from it. No signs of a struggle. No indication that anyone had ever left. That was the detail that bothered me most. I had been a park ranger for over 12 years. I had worked wildfire recoveries, animal attacks, suicide searches, and one incident involving a group of people who believed the forest spoke directly to them, an incident the department never officially documented. But this felt different. When the dispatcher gave me the location, she hesitated before saying it out loud. People only do that when they're naming a place they believe should stay unnamed. Sector C, North Slope. The old logging roads. The ones no longer marked on any map. My partner that morning was Evan. New hire. Quiet, observant, the type who noticed details but didn't always know what to do with them. We left the station just after 4:30 a.m. The fog was thick enough to dull the sound of the engine, making it feel like we were gliding instead of driving. The forest closed in quickly. Tall trees leaned inward, their silhouettes resembling ribs around a hollow chest. We parked where the service road ended. The trailhead sign was missing. Not broken. Not rotted. Just gone. The bolts were still there, clean and exposed, like teeth. Evan noticed it too. He opened his mouth to comment, then stopped himself. I was relieved. Some places don't like being spoken about. The forest was silent. Not the normal kind of quiet with birds and insects and distant movement. This silence felt intentional. Heavy. As if everything else had stepped back to make room for us. About 20 minutes in, we found the first sign. A backpack. It was placed neatly beside the trail, zipped and upright, leaning carefully against a tree. Inside were sealed food packets, a full water bottle, a phone with a full battery, and no emergency calls made. Whoever had owned it hadn't run. They hadn't panicked. They hadn't tried to leave. Evan whispered, "Why would someone just leave this?" I didn't answer. I already knew the truth. Whatever happened didn't take them while they were moving. It took them while they were standing still. We continued forward. That was the mistake. The trail narrowed and began twisting in ways that didn't match the terrain. It looped back on itself, but never perfectly. Each turn was just slightly off, enough to disorient the internal sense of direction. Eventually, Evan stopped. "Didn't we pass this tree already?" he asked. I looked. Same bark scar. Same broken branch. Same white lichen mark shaped like a fingernail. But the ground around it was different. The dirt was pressed flat, as if many people had stood there at once. All facing inward. That was when we heard the voice. It came from behind us. It was my voice. Not an echo. Not a recording. It said my name in the exact tone Evan used when he wanted my attention without panic. I turned before I could stop myself. There was nothing there, only fog and trees. Evan stared at me. "You didn't say anything, right?" I shook my head slowly. Then his radio crackled. Static hissed, and through it came a woman's voice, soft, shaking, unmistakably familiar. "Evan," it said. "I can't find you." His face drained of color. That voice belonged to his mother. She had died 3 years earlier. I grabbed his arm. "Don't answer," I said. "That isn't real." The voice continued, calm and inviting. "You're lost," it said. "But I see a light. Come here." Somewhere to our left, deep within the fog, something moved. Not walking. Not running. Shifting like a body rearranging itself joint by joint. Evan began to cry without realizing it. Tears streamed down his face, but his eyes never left the place his body was slowly turning toward. His feet didn't move, but his shoulders leaned forward, drawn like metal toward a magnet. I pulled him back. At first, he resisted gently. Then harder. "Let me go," he whispered. "She's right there." That's when the smell hit us. Rot. Damp earth. Old blood. The fog parted just enough for us to see it. Tall. Too tall. Its limbs bent at angles that didn't belong to anything that walked upright. Its face, or what passed for one, was smooth and hollow, like the skin had been stretched over an empty skull. No eyes. No mouth. Just a pale indentation where something human should have been. But it was speaking. Using voices it had collected. My voice. Evan's mother. A child laughing. A man screaming. All layered together. I didn't think. I didn't aim. I fired. The sound of the gunshot vanished into the forest like it had never existed. The thing didn't react. Instead, it took one slow step forward. And then another. I grabbed Evan and ran. We didn't follow the trail. We ran straight through brush and branches, ignoring pain, ignoring direction. Behind us, the voices followed, not chasing, not rushing, just keeping pace. Then, suddenly, it stopped. The forest sounds returned all at once. Birds. Wind. Leaves. The fog lifted like a curtain being drawn back. We burst out onto the service road. Evan collapsed. Search teams went back later. They found nothing. No creature. No footprints. No backpack. No trail. Evan resigned 2 weeks later. He won't talk about that morning. But sometimes, late at night, he texts me one sentence. She keeps asking me to come back. I still work the park. And sometimes, just before dawn, when the fog rolls in heavy and low, I hear my own voice calling. Calling from deep in the trees, asking for help, asking for company, asking me to stand still. And the most terrifying part is knowing that one day, it might sound convincing enough to answer.